Okay.
Welcome, everybody. This is our Torah study with Rabbi Joe. It's February 8th, 2005, 25. Sorry.
Wonderful. All right, folks, glad you're all here.
Great to have
And
you all here.
I'm sure many more will join us, or at least I hope. I know my emails are going out now. People weren't receiving them before, but I think we've got that we fixed the problem. So this week we're going to study from, if you have your Bibles out, we're going to study portions of what we call the Parsha, sections from our weekly reading, the equivalent of a lectionary cycle in other faith communities. We have our weekly readings that are divided up into from the Torah, from the five books of Moses. We divide it up into 54 sections for the 52 weeks of the year. And why 54? 50. That's because the old joke, there's three types of Jews, those who can count and those who can't. So we have this, we'll discuss the Parsha history, the weekly breakdown another time. But right now we are in the book of Exodus, in Parshas or Parashat Beshalach. And it starts at 13, chapter 13, verse 17. And we are going to go, and it ends at 17, I believe 16 is where we end. Chapter 17, verse 16. Yeah. So we're going to go through a few sections from this that I think are quite relevant for life, to be honest with you, as human beings, regardless of faith, wherever you are on the faith spectrum. Some of the insights here, if we learn how to read a text more broadly, simply give us wonderful wisdom to live life with. And before, as we always do, before we begin our studies in the Jewish tradition, we have a blessing that we say before our studies. And it's to remind us that it's not a prayer. I mean, technically, I guess you could say it's a prayerful aspect to it. But the idea is that before we begin studying our holy texts, we say a blessing over them to remind us up front that blessing is available. There is real blessing and richness within the text that we're about to study. And I say this for all faith communities. And if we go into our studies with that reference, we might actually find more blessings within the text because that's in our mindset. That's our reference. So the blessing in Hebrew, for those who know it, and then I'll translate it. For those who know it, you could certainly say it along with us. But Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kedishanu b'mitzvaysav, v'tzivanu la'asait b'divrei soida. So blessed are you, Lord our God, ruler of the universe, who has sanctified us with his commandments and commanded us to engage deeply, la'asaik, with these holy words, these words of Torah, these words of instruction. So Torah, the five books of Moses, often are called, certainly in the Christian tradition and sometimes in Judaism, the law of Moses. Torah in Hebrew is often translated as law. That's a very narrow translation, or a very limited, I should say, translation. It has many other dimensions of meaning, one of which is instruction. So the focal point today is on our Torah portion, on our instructional portion for life. For this week is going to be from, again, the parasha, the weekly section of Beshalach. And again, we're not going to go through the whole portion, all of the chapters from 13 through 17. We will highlight a few dimensions or a few aspects of the chapter that I think will really speak to us. And as always, I look forward to your thoughts and your questions throughout. This isn't meant to be a monologue. I really do value your insights and your questions. So just to give us a brief, almost a butchered view of us with this summary. I'm butchering the entire parsha, but I'm summarizing it briefly, and then we'll focus on a few portions. In this week's Torah portion, if we look through it, it basically speaks of we're out of Egypt now. We got out last week, and now we're on our way to ultimately Sinai. But in this week's Torah portion, what happens is after Pharaoh sends us out, that's what the first word means, Vayihi Beshalach Paro, when Pharaoh sent out Es Ha'am, the people. So Pharaoh sends us out and then has this moment, a realization of, oh my goodness, what did I do? He needs us, he wants us, so he begins pursuing the Israelites in the desert. We're going to discuss it in a moment, but ultimately what happens is in that pursuit, we go through the sea, the Red Sea, or the Reed Sea, and the army follows behind us. The waters come crashing down upon them. We sing a special song in Exodus 15 about the song of the sea and the miracle that took place. And then what happens shortly after that is we begin complaining, which is a constant theme that we will see throughout this portion because of lack of food and water. We end up getting manna, or the manna, and some quail. So the vegetarians are, I'm sure, very happy with the quail. And ultimately, we get some water from a rock, and then we end with Amalek, a tribe that attacks the Israelites and are defeated. And then we have this memory, this constant memory, one of the 6 things we remember every day, that to remember Amalek, to remember that evil is there, out there and within, according to the rabbis. And it's something we have to overcome daily. It's a daily struggle to overcome and fight against the evil within the world and the darkness that's within us. So let's now turn to Exodus with that brief summary. Let's start off with Exodus 13, chapter 13, verse 17. And would someone just read that first verse for us? Verse 13, 17. Anybody who has a text? Caleb, you have a text? Who has a text?
I
Someone have
have
a
it.
text? Okay, so let's go for it. Whoever has the text, read verse 13, chapter 13, verse 17.
Now, when Pharaoh let the people go, God did not lead them by way of the Philistine land, though this was the nearest. For he thought, should the people see that they would have to fight, they might change their minds and return to Egypt.
Okay, that is a perfectly wonderful translation. I'm sure we had something similar across all of our different texts or different versions. I want to highlight a few things. One, something very interesting. We are out. We're out of Egypt. And I would instead of let the people, how was it, Nadine? Sorry, was it let the people go, you said?
It says
That how
now, when the Pharaoh, yes, it says, God did not lead them by way of
before that.
is
Now
now when Pharaoh let, yes, let the
yeah, let.
people go.
Okay. So I would just nuance it slightly. He certainly did let them go, but the word shalach has to do more with sending. So Beshalach, when Pharaoh sent out the people, it's more of a sending rather than a permissive letting. That verb shalach has to do with sending. Can it ever have the element of more that a permissive, a letting? Yeah, here I think the focus is more on, yeah, same idea. People let the people go. Okay. Well, I think the idea is more sending. But the idea is we are out. Have I lost everybody? I only see a big screen. Is everybody still there?
Okay.
I
We're
just
good.
shared the
Okay.
screen, so if people needed to see
Still
the
here.
text, it was there. If you don't want me to share it, I don't have to. I just thought it might help people to see it.
Okay. So that's the text. Now I can't see anybody. So as
Uh-oh.
long as you can all see, we're good. So with that, we're out of Egypt right now. We are out. And what's interesting is he sent us out. You would think that this is a moment that we should be celebrating. We're out, even though he didn't lead us by way of the land of the Philistines because it was near. But the idea simply that we are out should be a moment of joy and relief because we are now out from under the bondage of Pharaoh. So can we reduce the screen for a moment, Sherry?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, wonderful. What's interesting here is the first word that Nadine translated as has in her translation now. Does anybody else have anything different from now? There's nothing wrong with now. There's nothing wrong with now. Does anybody else have anything different from the first word and now when Pharaoh sent or let the people go?
I do. Um,
Mine is also different, Rabbi Joe.
Okay, what does it say?
So mine says, and it came to pass when Pharaoh had let the people go.
Okay, so when it came to pass, and Sebastian, probably the same?
the same.
Okay. So, and it came to pass, or it happened when Pharaoh sent out. We'll just stick with sent out for now. What's interesting here is, again, if we're out, this has been the plea and the cry and the prayer of the Jewish people in Egypt was to be released, to be set free, to be out from under the bondage. What's very interesting here is that first word, vayehi, and now, and it came to pass, and it happened. This, according to in our what's called the Talmud, in our oral tradition, this word vayehi means, and it happened, and it came to pass. This often indicates, and it states it quite directly, and then it nuances it in the Talmud, in Megillah, in the section called Megillah. It says that Vayehi indicates a time of sorrow or sadness or struggle. But if we're just getting out from under Pharaoh's reign, the question is, why would it start off with this term that potentially has that dimension of sadness or struggle or sorrow? We're released. Our prayers have been realized or answered, and we're out. Why this term of potential sorrow and struggle? And if you listen to the melody marker that's associated with it, in Hebrew, our texts are all the words in Hebrew in the Torah, in the whole Bible, always have a melody marker over them. And if you listen to the melody marker, just tell me what emotion does it bring out? What response do you hear when you hear Vayehi? Does that sound like a melody of what emotion? Anybody call out an emotion that it sounds like? There's nothing right or wrong.
Plaintiff?
Plaintive. Anne, you said plaintive?
Correct.
Yeah, it doesn't sound the happiest, does it? I just won the lottery. It sounds like something much bad. Toil, struggle, pain, angst. What's interesting, and it's not very common, in this first verse, 3 times we have this melody. And this is a marker in the Hebrew. It's a melody marker, but it also functions as a punctuation marker, a division within the verse. It's a pause. It's a type of pause. We have short pauses and long pauses. But we have it 3 times in this verse. Vayehi. And then we have Beshalach para yes ha'am. Now listen again. V'lo nacham eleihim. Derech eretz pelishtim. Ki karefu. Ki. Listen. Amar eleihim. Pen yenachem ha'am. B'reisam milchama. V'shavu mitzrayma. 3 times. And then coupled with the fact that this word vayehi can mean this idea of sorrow, struggle, pain, according to the Gemara. It clarifies it later and says when and when not. But the first statement is this is an indication of sorrow and struggle. The question is, why? Why would our release when we're out start with potentially a word that indicates at times sorrow, struggle, regret, pain, angst, and then have melodies within that verse that sound like such sorrow? They sound so sorrowful. Any thoughts on why, when we are out, there should be this melodic, sort of plaintive melody? And any thoughts before I offer one? Because I think it's a very instructive pattern here that we have with this melodic pattern and this potential word of, oh boy, what just happened?
I might have
Rabbi
an
Joe, go
Yeah,
ahead.
whoever
I was just going
was,
to
I
say,
didn't see the name.
this
Oh, Lerlin.
Lerlin, it feels like to me an assignment or work, like going to work. It's not, I don't feel like it's sadness. It feels like, okay, now I've got this burden I have to do. I have to fulfill, and it's not and it is a burden. They feel like it's a burden, even though they're freed. But now they, uh, they have to work out their
Hmm.
destiny, where they're going. And that can be a struggle.
Okay.
That's how it feels to me.
Yeah, no. Even though they, as we'll see in a few moments, we're going to read a few texts, starting with chapter 1 in Exodus, about they were groaning. They were just groaning in agony. That sometimes getting released from that is even worse because now we're on our own and we have to make it. Very good. Any other thoughts?
one idea that I've had. I didn't give this in my sermon last night, but we understand these texts to be written later. The cantillations marks weren't written down as these events were happening. So could the Masoretic scribe have been kind of hinting to the future readers, oh, there's going to be some surahs, some troubles later on. Here's the hint in the melody.
I think, yes. So these Masoretic notes were not given at the time when, according to tradition, Moses received the Torah at Sinai. These were given probably over, I don't know, almost a couple, over, let's see, 1300, 300, probably about 1800 years after, if you, depending on when you date Moses from, but uh, well more than 1,000 years after. So yes, they were officially given or placed here later as punctuation markers. But I think there's an intention more than just simply punctuation. You're right. And the language that they comment, the word itself, remember, indicates potentially sorrow and pain. So they are telling us there is something very plaintive or sad about this particular verse or these series of verses that are following, even though we are released. So they are indicating, yes, Caleb, something. And it might be like Lerlin said, that now we're on our own and we have to live life and make it on our own. It was bad before, but this is also not ideal. Any other thoughts before I offer one?
I was just going to say real quick on there being notes later on. These were words that were sung throughout history by each from one generation to the next. So I'm sure they continued what was already felt in those words.
Sure. And that's the way the oral tradition works is that that became written. Yes, what they're trying to do is capture what was originally there, and without going into the academic versus the more, I don't want to say devotional, but more religious way of approaching a text. There's often a divide between academia and religious scholarship within a devotional movement. We have different approaches, but yes, Nadine, very yes, absolutely. The tradition thinks a lot of it was always present. It just wasn't written. There was always an oral component, and those were part of an essential part of the written text that we have. One thought I had was the idea that Pharaoh sent us out and we're out. It's wonderful that we're out from under oppression and abuse. That's always something to celebrate. So what could be something for us to take note of that's almost Well, I mean, something that we really regret and realize, wow, something else didn't happen here. This happened, but what else didn't happen? The rabbis, as we'll see in a moment when we go through the text, the rabbis teach that not everybody left Egypt when we went out. And we'll see it in a moment based on a particular interpretation of a word. Most of the Jews, even though we all wanted to get out from under the Pharaoh's abusive oppression, many stayed back because they feared, on one level, like you were saying, Lurlin, well, out there we don't know what we face. It's a wilderness, and I think I'm just going to suffer here rather than wander into that freedom that awaits me. That's something that should pain us. And the truth is, the rabbis teach that maybe we did leave Egypt, even those who left and are out. But did we leave with Egypt in our hearts? And the truth is, the rabbis teach that the generation that left Egypt had to die in the desert because they never truly left Egypt. They never left that state of slave. We are slaves. We are oppressed. We're not leaders. And that can't be the community that goes into Israel and leads the next generation into a life that is, it's not going to be a healthy life. That's not a healthy mindset. That's not a healthy heart. So what is so sad here, and it happened, yes, we got out. But Vayehi, the melody and the term itself is hinting potentially, it's all interpretation. But I think they're guiding us into a reflection that says, we got out, but there's a real qualifying aspect here. And two qualifications I think that they're guiding us into are, let's remember, we left people behind. They wouldn't come, and how sad that is, that some who have an opportunity to come out of a life that is dark and oppressive choose to stay back. And more importantly, that's also us. We often don't leave even when we leave. The Egypt metaphorically travels with us. That narrowness, the Hebrew word for Egypt, Mitzrayim, comes from like Meitzar, Mina Meitzar, from in the Psalms, Mina Meitzar, from the straits, from between the straits, those narrow straits. Egypt is narrowing. Egypt narrows. And even if we get out, are we still living within those narrow boundaries in terms of our minds, in terms of our hearts, in terms of our vision? If we do, even though we got out, even if we're sent out, we're never going to enter into a place of depth or breadth or freedom or broad vision because we're still in Egypt. We're still in that oppressive place, even if we're out. I think those are a few reflections for us to really take to heart, because so often in life we have potential opportunities for redemption, but we don't allow ourselves to realize them because we either stay back or we move forward with a reference, with a heart, with vision that will keep us as if we're still in Egypt. We really never left, even though we got out. And that is something that we should all, how often in my life have I had beautiful opportunities to redeem a part of my life, to make my life and the world better, and I chose to stay back in a darker place, in an unredeemed place. Normally at our Sabbath studies, when we're doing it in person, we often go around and offer a reflection. Here, you know what? Here's a time where I, in life, chose to stay back, metaphorically, in a place of Egypt, in a place of narrowness. Or I chose not to see with broader vision. I chose to see with narrowness instead of breadth. I don't know if anybody wants to offer a reflection. Maybe it's not as easy on the on just a blank screen or a computer screen. But if anybody has one thought to what's one way that I personally stayed back in Egypt, and here's what I could have done to go forward. Anybody want to offer one reflective moment? And if not, I'll move on into the next verse to help help us get out a little more?
I just wanted you to know that Ann Job commented, how do we do that?
How do we stay in Egypt? I'll have to hear more. Thank you for telling me. I didn't see the text. Yeah, if anybody has hands or text that I don't see, just call out. Uh, if I'm understanding the question correctly, how do we stay, or how do we choose to stay in a place of narrowness,
No,
in a
how do we
place?
let it go? How do
How do,
we,
beautiful, beautiful. Yes, that's where we're going. Thank you. And the how is often so critical. And even when we hear the how, we still often stay back. We are given a way out, and we still. So let's continue. Keep that question in the forefront of your mind. Beautiful. Absolutely. The how is what we need. And then even when we don't, at least we realize there are ways out. But thank you, Anne, for that. And any other questions before I move on to the next verse that I didn't see? Okay. Or the next portion of the verse? Often when we get out, so when Pharaoh sent out the people, God didn't lead them by way of the land of the Philistines. And in the Hebrew, there's somewhat of an emphatic marker on the way of. Derech, not just, that's a strong marker. Derech, we emphasize it, the way of. It's calling our attention to the way. We always need to be focused on the way we are going. It's highlighting our attention to way. The way, he didn't lead us by way of the Philistines. Kikarov hu, which was near, which was close. Or because it was near. Ki, it's almost a causal. Because it was near. God specifically didn't, this is again, whether you take the story literally or a metaphoric journey of inner redemption. From not only that Pharaoh in Egypt, but the Pharaoh the rabbis speak of within. That's a horrible Pharaoh we often live with. The Pharaoh that reigns over us from within. Sometimes it's worse than the Pharaohs without. But God didn't lead us through the land of the Philistines because it was near. It was close. That's the most obvious way to go. Boom, we go from here and we go here. That will lead us to our destination. Why? Because God said, perhaps the people, Yenachem, will reconsider when? Biroisam milchama, when the people encounter literally war, but battle, struggle. What happens when we often leave our place of struggle, whether we're sent out or whether we choose to leave? What happens is, as you were saying, Lurlin, we go out and we realize, wow, this is not as easy as I thought it was going to be. I thought I was going to be out in a place of freedom, and it was going to be a place of bliss and light and hope. And now I'm realizing this wilderness that I'm in, this life that I have now chosen, is terrifying. I have no idea where to go, and I have no idea how to make it. That's the struggle. When it says war, perhaps they see war and they will reconsider. That's not them, that's all of us. When we do get out, we see immediately that there are battles, there are struggles that are different from where we were in Egypt, that inner Egypt or a real Egypt. So God doesn't lead us on a way that we can, when we're going to encounter struggles on our way out. Why? If it's near, we have the opportunity to return back. We're going to go back. We're going to go back. And the tragedy in our lives is when we do get out, we don't understand or we don't realize or we're not able to face that life is a milchama. It is a war. It is a battle. It is a struggle, both within and without. And that so often makes us want to shavu. It makes us want to turn or return back to Mitzrayim, to that place of narrowness, to that place of struggle. And we all do it. It's not just them. This is a broad teaching for all of us that we all struggle with in life when we get out. Even if our greatest hope was to be released, we get out, and as we'll see, as soon as they get out and we're going a little further, they're going to come across some difficulties, and immediately the complaints and everything else begin. So we have to know up front that getting out of a place of narrowness, remember, the rabbis relate the word Mitzrayim, Egypt, to that place of narrowness, because it narrows us, our visions, our hearts. We have to understand that when we are coming out, we are going to see, Bir Oisam, we are going to see and experience battles, struggles, to help us. It's almost I don't want to say it's a gift, but it's reminding us that the practice of growth in life, to be redeemed, means we are going out and we are going into a broader place. And it might be a wilderness, and it's terrifying, and we're going to encounter battles and struggles, and that's where we have to be to continue to broaden and ultimately come to that metaphoric place of Sinai, metaphoric place of revelation, of wisdom in our wanderings through the wilderness. The goal is always to come to that place of vision. We go out of Egypt to receive wisdom at Sinai, but it's not an easy battle to make it. We're going to see and encounter a lot of struggles and battles along the way, and this is how we're going to have to learn to make it through these struggles within life. Otherwise, we're going to go back either physically to Egypt and be oppressed, or we're going to live within with an Egypt mentality or an Egyptian vision that narrows our potential for seeing the breadth and the depth and the beauty within life. And let's go to verse 18 for one moment now, the next verse, because remember I said the sadness that was indicated by that first word Vayehi, potentially, and the melody. One reason was that 4/5, according to the rabbis, of the Jews stayed back in Egypt. They chose. They had a way out, and they chose to stay back. And again, metaphorically for us, how often do we have ways out of our circumstances, our trials, our struggles, and we choose to remain in that darkness? And that Hebrew word for darkness in the biblical language, the rabbis interpret it as, well, it's biblically, but it's a thick darkness. And the rabbis teach those who were standing couldn't sit. The darkness was so paralyzing. And those who were sitting couldn't rise because the darkness was so present. And that's again a metaphor for us in life. When the darkness that surrounds us paralyzes us, can we still, like the group that did leave, can we choose to still make our way out, even if we have to crawl out? Or are we going to stay back in our paralysis? So when it says here in verse 18, God turned the people toward the way of the wilderness, to the reeds, the Sea of Reeds. And then it says, be curious for the translations here, the children of Israel, again in verse 18, the children of Israel were armed. Okay, they were armed when they went out from the land of Egypt. So it's Vachamushim alu v'nei Yisrael me'eretz Mitzrayim. Does anybody have anything different than they were armed when they went up from the land of Egypt? In verse 18. I can't hear you, Jason. You're still on mute.
I have a different.
Okay.
Mine.
Sorry,
uses.
can you hear me?
Yes.
Sorry.
So what do you have, Jason, and then Sebastian?
Sake.
Or what do you have, Sebastian?
Sorry, can you hear me now? So sorry about that.
Yes.
Yes, okay. We're on a road trip right now. But I was gonna say in my scriptures it says Israel went up harnessed out of the land of Egypt. Harnessed. Or equipped for battle. It says in like my footnotes.
Equipped for battle. Okay, so that's more in line. The second one, equipped for battle, because we say went up armed. Is that what yours has, Sebastian? Yeah.
Yeah.
Anything different from anybody else, Caleb, in your version or Bunny?
Um, this one says, went up from the land of Egypt in military formation.
Okay. So same idea as armed, a little more structured or technical, fine. Caleb, what do you have?
Jewish Publication Society also says armed.
Okay, fine. So the rabbis relate this word to chamushim to chomesh, which is a fifth. Again, it's a more midrashic read, which teaches that, what does it mean they went up a fifth? It means only a fifth of the Jews went up out of Egypt. The rest, the other 4/5, stayed back. Some say it was a 50th, some say it was a 500th. There's different traditions on this word. But the point is that so many of us, of our people, and I say this generically as humans, yes, it's talking about them in particular, but I view these stories as sacred models for life, for our lives. These are us and our stories. Only a fifth went out. That's where this idea that 4/5 stayed back. And that's why it could be that melodic beginning. That's wonderful. We got out. But we can't simply have a celebration that we got out when so many are still left behind, even if they chose to. We still have to have a heart that is pained because so many choose or so many remain in a place of bondage, in a place of struggle, in a place of pain, when they have the opportunity to come out. Our celebration over our redemption is wonderful, but it's qualified because our brothers and sisters, our fellow human beings, are still in a place of darkness and in a place of sorrow. I just wanted you to see where it comes from, that another hint within the text of why the rabbis potentially see this going out of Egypt as something not just to celebrate, but also something that we should at least give pause to say, not everybody left. We had to leave some behind, and that's painful. And that's, I think, a truism in life. Some are always going to stay behind, and we have to have a heart for that. It's very sad that a human being is suffering and chooses not to come out.
And Rabbi Joe,
Yes, sir.
yeah, I did want to say, now that I'm reading the passage again and you're explaining it, I've never even read it in that way, just the battle array or even military formation. And like you said, it wasn't that they went out and yes, this is great and we're going to be free. They went out in battle formation. Sometimes we go into a change in our life and you need to be up in arms. You need to make sure you're not lax when you go into that next chapter of your life, because you might just end up in disaster.
Yes, and so the language is there in verse 17. God didn't lead them by way of the Philistines. And by the way, this word for lead, when it says God didn't lead them by way of the Philistines, for it was near. And then it says, and God said the people might reconsider. It's very interesting. It's a play on the words, to lead and to reconsider. It's Nacham and Yenachem. They sound very similar in terms of their root. Okay? And so the rabbis make a connection. At least my way of reading it is they say there's a connection between them. And what God didn't lead us, again, that word for lead, this might be too much Hebrew, but leading and reconsidering. The rabbis, when they find words that are similar in form or similar roots in the same verse, they often make connections between them. They think there's poetry there, poetic wisdom. And so the idea is God doesn't lead us because we may reconsider. What's the idea of leading and reconsidering? I think one idea is how often, and this is, again, in the context of sadness, tragedy, how often is, what leads us in life? What guides us in life? Is it wisdom or is it ambiguity and doubt and reconsideration? Are we reconsidering? Is our path in life only to reconsider? Is what leads us, Nacham, simply Yenachem, is what leads me in life, is I'm always reconsidering. I'm never moving forward. What leads me in life are my thoughts of always being in a place of considering. Well, sometimes we got to get off the fence. We have to think beforehand. But if you're only in a place of Yenachem, considering, that's going to lead you nowhere. So I think that's what the interplay is between Nacham and Yenachem on a deeper or more poetic read of the text. How often in life, what is leading us? Is it determination, or is it simply ambiguity, doubt, and reconsidering? I'm always in a place or state of considering. That's not a wonderful guide to lead you into life. And yes, it is possible that you're going to encounter war and struggle on the way out. Absolutely. When we seek to grow, there are going to be battles we have to face. And usually, that's what's so beautiful about the term in verse 17. He didn't lead us by way of the Philistines because it was near. Kikadaihu. It was near. It was close. This was the easiest way. This was the easiest way for me to get out. But if we always follow the way of least resistance, the easiest way, we're probably never going to go very far, because the first battle we encounter, this was the easiest way out, and the first battle we're going to encounter is going to cause me to go right back, because I can't face struggle. And life is a battle. To overcome is a battle. To grow is a battle. We have to be ready for that. So that's there in the first verse, first two verses. And now let's jump as we're going along the way. Let's go into chapter 14. You know, there was the end of 13. There was a pillar of fire, and we had a cloud and the pillar of fire to guide us. In verse 14, chapter 14, verse 1, the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, it's very interesting language here. It says, "Speak to the children of Israel." And again, remember, that's speaking to us. Speak to the children of Israel and let them turn back. Have them turn back to encamp. We're on our way, but now we've got to stop. We have to turn back and encamp before a place called Pi Hachiros. Pi Hachirot. And it's between Migdol and the sea, before Baal Tzafon. And you're to camp, or encamp, opposite this place by the sea. Does everybody's translation have Pi Hachirot in verse 2? Speak to the children of Israel and have them turn back and encamp before Pi Hachirot. Is that what everybody says? Something, whether the English version, yeah. Nobody's gives a translation, correct? Okay. Rabbis relate that this place, these stops along the way, and this is true in general for the way the rabbis read our texts, that every stop along the way is a place that we have to stop in our way, in our journey. It's a stop along our way, and each of the places has significance in our journey, in this case, out of Egypt. These aren't just random places that they had to stop that have no significance. Remember, we're getting out of Egypt. We're coming out from under oppression and from a place of degradation, and we're going to a place of redemption. The stops along the way in the rabbinic mind, I'm framing it my own way, but this is their insight. The stops along the way are there as guides for us on our stops. Each place has meaning along the way, in this case, out of enslavement and ultimately to redemption at Sinai. So this stop here, it mentions Pi Hachirot. Right? We had other ones in the end of 13. We were talking about Sukkot and Esam and so forth. These were important places. But I want to focus here that here we are and we have a turn. We're going and we're turned back and we stop at Pi Hachirot. This name, Pi Hachirot, in Hebrew can be interpreted as the mouth of freedom. The mouth of liberty. What does that mean? What does that mean for us? Well, what does a mouth do? What's one thing a mouth does in life for us? Anybody?
It opens.
It opens, fine. And when it opens, it can, like, what am I doing right now when I'm opening my mouth?
It communicates.
It speaks, it communicates, it teaches. Okay? It also eats, chews, right? Breaks things down. When we are on our journey, we have to take time to reflect, to chew on it, so to speak, right? Where am I? Where are my stops? Where am I? And how can I continue to move forward? I've got to reflect, chew on it in English idiom. But it also means the mouth of freedom. Well, the mouth also speaks. So when we go out, this is sort of answering, both of these are answering your question, Anne, about how. When we get out, first we have to know up front the battle is going to be there, and it's going to rage within us and before us, outward and inward. And if we don't know that, we're going right back to our old ways. So the next stage is when we are on the way. Are we reflecting? Are we chewing things over? Are we meditating about where we are and how we can continue to move forward? That's the mouth that will lead to freedom, to keep us on the road to freedom. Or you could say the mouth that speaks. Along the way, there's a voice, there's a calling, there's some type of communication as we go on our way. First stop is Pihachirot. It means there is something calling out to you on our way, or something calling from within. Freedom is still the direction you have to go. I know you want to go back to Egypt, but our first stop here in chapter 14, notice we turn back to encamp at this place called the mouth of freedom. Are we able to hear the call within or see the signs around us that are calling us to continue along the journey out of Egypt, out of darkness, on towards Sinai, towards redemption, towards revelation, towards holy wisdom? We have to be able to hear that call along the way in the midst of everything else that is trying to call us back, in the midst of all the circumstances that we are encountering, the milchama, the battle that we are encountering on the way out. That's why God doesn't lead us the close way. There are too many callings and struggles and battles that will lead us back into a place of Egypt. So we have to, on our journeys, remember that there's a place for us. The first place here in chapter 14 is, can I hear that mouth of freedom, of liberty, calling us, calling me to continue along the journey, to see that there is still hope and value in pursuing a life of liberty. That word, Pihachirot, is related also to the word for harut, which means to engrave. We have to engrave this within us. This is, again, more to your question, Anne. This has to be, I don't just chew on it, it's a mouth that I chew on. I'm reflecting on liberty. I'm also engraving it. I'm engraving it within, so that this is also now a part of me, part of my narrative, that I can help guide myself with this inner being when I face, when I see Bir Oisam Milchama, when I see these battles before me. I have engraved within me this call that something great and greater is potentially there. I always have to remember that in spite of the battles, otherwise I'm going to turn back. I think we need these encouragements. We need these reminders along our way if we're seeking. Again, if we're just getting out and we're not really seeking to be redeemed within, or seeking holy wisdom that awaits us at, metaphorically, Sinai, along the way of our journey, if we're not seeking with these reminders, we're going to go back. We're not going to make it out. So any thoughts before we move to a little more on again what happens to us? What happens to us? We have to keep this. I'm reinforcing. This is sort of the call for me. I should say we, but I'll speak personally. I'm always seeking to go back to where I came from, even though it wasn't wonderful. But I'm often just terrified of what awaits me in that wilderness of the unknown. Maybe I'll even fail in my journey. So it's better to go back. We need these encouragements. Before we find out another reason that we often want to go back, are there any thoughts here that anybody has before we move to the next section here? Okay.
Just one thing?
Yeah.
I just never thought about it before, how the Pi Hachiros is never translated.
Yeah.
And I find it kind of tragic, or very sad at least, that we're camping at the mouth of freedom and this generation was still never able to fully free themselves.
And it is. I mean, folks, if I'm ever out in your areas and you come to our Sabbaths, I mean, this will be a session of like weeping for us. I wouldn't let us move on, but this is a video, and that's okay. We're on screens here. It's not as easy. These are painful realizations. We want to know why the world doesn't change? Wonderful. Let's start asking, why haven't we changed? Why will we? And we go through all the motions. But what ultimately changes within? The Jews left Egypt, but they had to die, according to the rabbis. The first generation had literally to die in the wilderness because they never really left Egypt. And they couldn't lead people into freedom and redemption and wisdom if they haven't truly left that place of Egypt, that place of narrowness. That's an oppressive place to be, to narrow. We're between the straits. Mina Meitzar. We're between the straits. And if we want to have this the opening of the boundaries, we have to leave the narrow boundaries of Egypt within our hearts, within our vision. And that's why it's so beautiful, this place, the mouth of freedom. It's also, again, that word freedom is related to the word for harut, engraved. It's something we have to engrave repeatedly within us because the forces are out there to lead us back, So let's go to chapter 14, verse, let's read 10 through 12. We'll see this.
And sorry, just one more thing before you started. Anne was just about to say something, and I'm not sure if it got cut off.
That's
Yes,
okay. My
Anne.
voice
No, I'm
is
sorry.
a little soft sometimes. I was just gonna say thank you for that. That was really beautiful. I did not know what that word translated into. So that was really helpful, that name. And it also helped me think about the difference between escaping something and really redemption.
Yeah.
They're not the same thing. And the kind of reflective and contemplative work people need to do to actually lead themselves to redemption. So thank you very much. That was really helpful.
Thank you. And you're right. You're absolutely right. 100%. And that's why Kikarov who? God doesn't lead us. It's not cruel. And whether you think the story's true or not, even if it's just an ancient myth, the idea that if it's close, if our way out, if we go out and we find the easiest way out because it's near, we're going to go back. Unless we do this work and this reflection for this journey, which is a battle. Let's go to 14 verses 10 through 12, because now the Pharaoh, let's go through 10 through 12. Someone want to read? We just finished with Pi Hachirot again in phone. So we've got that reference there of Pi Hachirot again. Is this voice? We've got to remember this mouth, this sound, this call of liberty, freedom. We have to engrave it. Okay, anybody? Let's go. Bunny, do you want to read from verse 10 through 12?
Okay. Am I on?
Yeah.
As Pharaoh approached, the Israelis looked up, and there were the Egyptians bearing down on them. Extremely frightened, the Israelis cried out to the Lord. They also told Moses, "Was it because there were no graves in Egypt that you took us out to die in the desert? What have you done to us by bringing us out of Egypt?"
Wow. They get out. They're terrified at what they're encountering now. And it is terrifying. But this isn't just the children of Israel's cry when it says to Moses, were there no graves in Egypt that you took us out to die in the wilderness? What is this that you have done to us? Did you read that part? But I forget. I was looking at the.
Yep.
You
Yep.
read, what is this that you have done to us?
Yes.
Okay. To take us out of Egypt? Somebody go to, I'll just read. I'll read a few verses here. I just want you to remember that, what a charge. What is this that you have done to us? What have you done to us to take us out of Egypt? Let's look at Exodus. I'll just read it. You don't have just to save time. In Exodus chapter 1, verse 11. Therefore, they set taskmasters over them, over the Jews, the Israelites, to afflict them with heavy burdens. Sounds lovely. Let's go to chapter 2. In verse 23, it speaks of the people of Israel groaned because of their slavery, enslavement, and cried out for help. Doesn't sound like they want to be in Egypt. And God heard their groaning and remembered his covenant. Their groaning, again, he heard. That was in 22 or 23. But a little earlier even, when Moses, 2:11, Exodus 2:11, when Moses had grown up, he went out to his people and he looked upon their burdens. This is when he's still living in Pharaoh's house. Hey, we could read several verses. Chapter 3, verse 7. And then the Lord said, I have surely seen the affliction of my people who are in Egypt, and I have heard their cry, the cry because of their taskmasters. I know their suffering. Verse 9, the cry of the people Israel has come up to me. I have also seen the oppression with which the Egyptians have oppressed them. You get the point. Nothing but sorrow, groaning, misery. And now we come here, things get rough. Yeah, Pharaoh's now coming. What do? They're behind us and the sea is before us. What do? What is our first response? Why'd you take us out of Egypt? That's the only thing they wanted. Same for us often. The only thing we desire is a release from, and then as soon as we encounter a battle, it's, as we'll see in a few moments, everything was so glorious back there. Why didn't you just leave us there? How often, what is this you have done to us to take us out of this place of torment? And then in verse 12 again, is this not the word that, or the statement that we made to you in Egypt? Let us be. In verse 12, chapter 14, let us be, and we will serve Egypt. That is tragic. That is tragic. Let us be, so that we may serve Egypt. Never really left. Let us be so that we may serve. That was the one place that we never wanted to be when we were there. And now, let us be. Let us be.
Rabbi Joe?
Yes.
It's human nature to look back on things and I think this is one of the demons we have to fight against.
Yes.
And to forget how bad things are historically and crave them because they're familiar. We have to, that's part of our journey, is we have to face that and realize that about ourselves and keep moving forward.
Absolutely. And at the near the end of verse 12, again, it says, let us be, and we will serve Egypt. Why? Ki tov lanu, for it was better for us. Avod etz Mitzrayim, mimusenu b'midbar. It was better for us that we should serve in Egypt. It was better. If you read again in the previous chapters of Exodus, it was just groaning and agony and suffering. Ki tov lanu. It was better for us. That's often what we do, Patricia. We redeem the past as if it was something glorious, when actually it was horrific. And yet we're seeking redemption. So we say, we want redemption, but what we do when we encounter struggle is we redeem the past and return back to it. And that's painful. That's a painful practice that we all have. And we're getting close to our time here. So let's look at, this is what we do. And let's go to what happens they go through the sea, ultimately. We make it through, the waters come down. This is the end of chapter 14. Moses stretches his hands out. The waters part, again, figurative, literal, wherever you are on that, just taking the imagery. The Israelites go through, and the waters come down over the Egyptians. And then we have something very unique in terms of the Hebrew text. But I'm thinking I'll point it out. But I'm not going to comment just because I want us for time. Caleb, can you show us on the page of what is called a tikkun? This is what we read our Torah from, or we practice reading the books of Moses from, for reading it in the synagogue. We practice it at home with vowels, with melody, with punctuation, and then we read it in the synagogue service without vowels, without punctuation, and without melody markers. So it basically is like having English words without vowels. So you could have BK. It could be book. It could be bake. You have to know the text. It doesn't have punctuation and it doesn't have melody. Can you show the page that begins with chapter 15? Go a little farther down so I can see the top. I need to see the top. A little higher, Caleb. I mean, a little lower. I can't see the top of. A little higher, At least I can't see it. There you go. Well, no, a little. I need to see the top sentence. So go down about 6 inches. Little lower, little lower.
For those of us who have it on speaker view, it would help if Christo unmutes.
Let me show you. Here, I'm just going to put it up. This right here. You see that?
Oh.
You can all see this. Okay? I want you to see right here. This, not that you can read it, but you can just look at the first letter right here. You can all see that? It looks like a door, kind of. Can we all see that okay?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. That's unique in a Sefer Torah or in a scroll. Because normally a page for us begins with this, even if you don't know the letter. Wait a second, look at this first letter right here. It's a different first letter. I don't know if you can see it. But just take my word. Normally every page in a Sefer Torah, what we read from in the synagogue, or what we read from in this book called the Tikkuns, a practice, Normally they begin, every page, the top of every page begins with an and, with a vav. This one begins, that we just had with the Song of the Sea, at the top of the page for the Song of the Sea, that Moses and the Jews and Miriam all sang. Here it begins with a different Hebrew letter. It's very rare, so I just wanted to point that out, and we'll discuss it. I'm going to have someone on who writes these for synagogues, and we're going to learn all about the intricacies of how we write our sacred texts, or at least the Torah, and what's called the Megillas, the other writings within the Bible. On a separate scroll, there are regulations and all kinds of laws and fascinating laws. But there's something very interesting about this page. It has a different letter starting it, and that's very, very rare in our tradition. They normally start with a vav, an and, this letter, rather than like something more like this, a hey. So I just want to leave us with something from the Song of the Sea, because this again illustrates what happens to us along our way. First, I would simply ask all of us, when you come out of a place of darkness, of struggle, of pain, the response here of Moses, the Jews, and then of Miriam and the women is song. Do you have that? That's not just words that are sung. The idea of song is much deeper in Judaism. When we come out, if we want to talk about, again, what are the stages of the way out, how we can stay out, how we can overcome the battles that we encounter. One is like we said before about Piachirot, remembering to hear the call of freedom along the way, even when it seems to be battling back against us, life battles against us. Another practice that we have to have is this, not just words of song, but the way of song. That when something in life and come out and we find redemption, is there a place of song within us? Because that song is going to help us along the way. That's part of that, just like the sound or the mouth or the call of freedom. This song is part of that call that we have to hear in response to getting out. Once we are out, we're going to hear all the reasons for going back. I'm afraid I encountered this. This is a wilderness. But can I hear that song within? The song of freedom that is calling me. That's a critical part. Again, we can just mouth the words, or we can truly sing them. If we truly have a moment of realization that we are out and we've actually left, we're not leaving with Egypt within us. We're not the ones who stayed back, but there are many who left with Egypt and had to die in the wilderness because they didn't have freedom calling within them. This, Az Yashir Moshe V'nei Yisrael, Es Hashira Hazais. Then Moses of Israel sang this song. We've got to find, we're not going to go through the song to see its beautiful symbolism, but I just want to start you off with, as we are going through and we come across, we're coming out, but then we come across the barriers, the battles, the fears, the struggles. We've got to remember that deep place of song within. That's going to be part of that mouth of freedom that is calling us to continue forward. But even with song, look what happens. And again, I'm abridging this because we're done here in 5 minutes. Not a Joe 5 minutes. Let's go to the end of chapter 15. Again, chapter 15, verse 1, through rabbis debate where the song ends, but 18 or 19. And then Miriam sings with everybody. All the women sing. And at verse 22. Logan, you want to read verse 22? And 23.
Sorry, I need to get it in translation just so I don't start saying stupid things.
Oh, don't worry. Nobody will know. Just say it in Hebrew.
Well, I just closed my Torah now, so sorry. Now I lost my 15:22.
Yeah, 22, 23, and let's go 24. Then I'll highlight the rest after.
Then Moses led Israel on from the Red Sea, and they went out to the wilderness of Shur.
Okay, keep that in mind. They went to the wilderness of Shur. Thank you.
That's it?
Nope, keep going. I just want to highlight that's their first stop. You did brilliant. Yes.
Right. They journeyed for 3 days in the wilderness without finding water. They came to Marah, but they could not drink the water at Marah because it was bitter. That's what it was named Marah.
Mm-hmm.
The people.
So we've got two place names, folks. Sorry, 2 place names. Take these seriously.
The people grumbled to Moses, "What are we going to drink?" So he cried out to the Lord, and the Lord showed him a tree. When he threw it into the water became drinkable.
Sweet, actually, sweet. Sweet in Hebrew.
The Lord made a maybe I should have read it from the Hebrew then.
Yeah.
The Lord made a statute and ordinance for them at Marah, and he tested them there.
Yes.
There you go. Finish it off.
And so it is. Remember, they made the water sweet. Not does that if you don't have sweet there, trust me, it's vayim teku hamayim. Okay, they made the water sweet because they were what? They were bitter. Okay, perfect. So this is so powerful. Right after going out, again, literally or metaphorically, parting the seas, we got out, the waters come back and drown the Egyptians. We're free. They're not coming after us again. And Miriam sings. All right, we sing the song, and then Miriam sings with all the women. Verse 22. We're journeying from the Sea of Reeds, and we go to the first stop here is the wilderness. Notice it's a wilderness. It's not a place of blessedness. We're not in the Garden of Eden. We are in a wilderness. We got out, and it's not pure glory. Again, the wilderness, the battles, the struggles. But what's the name of the place? Does anybody have anything other than Shur? A wilderness of Shur. Probably not. I can't imagine anybody would. Okay. The Hebrew word for Shur, Hebrew place name, Shur, also means to see. It's twice in Torah. It means to see. In Numbers 23 and 24. Right? It literally means also to see. It has other meanings, but the one I'm focusing on is to see. The people got out. And again, the people is us. We get out, they got out, we got out, and we end up in a wilderness of, not Shur, but in my way of reading this, in a wilderness of vision. We lost our way again. That narrowness of vision. Remember, Egypt means to narrow, according to the rabbis. Mitzrayim, from Tsar, to narrow. We get out, no matter what we are seeing. This is all of us. We are seeing redemption. We are seeing the miraculous. We're seeing the holy. We're seeing so much light and glory. Yet, where do we go? Once we leave that moment, the encounter is done. What happens to all of us so often is we then are in a place of Shur, the wilderness of Shur, which is a wilderness of vision, and we can't see. We just simply can't see. No matter what we've seen, we still can't see because that call or that vision is not engraved within. And so what's the first place we then come to? What's the first place is Mara, or modern Hebrew Mara. What do you think Mara means? Anybody, except for Logan, who knows Hebrew?
Well, it means bitter. Naomi in the book of Ruth says, "Don't call me Naomi," meaning pleasant.
That's right. That's right.
Bitter.
This word,
woman.
That's right. And they couldn't find water, and they called they couldn't drink the waters of Mara because they were bitter. Mara means bitter, bitterness, mar, right? Maror in the Pesach meal. We have the Seder. If anybody's joining us, I hope you do, in I don't know, a couple months, whatever, April. That's one of the foods that we have on our plate to remind us of the bitterness. But what's fascinating is we come to a place of Mara, a place of bitterness, and they couldn't drink the waters of Mara. Why? Because they were bitter. My question to everybody is, what was bitter?
It doesn't seem like what was bitter, more like who was bitter, the people.
No, the text, what is the not on a deeper level. That's the rabbis. You're right. You're absolutely right. But they couldn't drink the waters because they were bitter. The antecedent of they is the mayim, the waters. That's what this is talking about. But you're right, Caleb. What the rabbis say is there's ambiguity. It doesn't say the waters were bitter. It says they. But it's talking about they came to Mara and they couldn't drink the waters. So we've got a they, the people, and the waters. The question then is, for the rabbis, a more poetic way of reading it, what is the they? The reason that the waters were bitter is because the people were bitter. They could only see bitterness, so their only experience in life was bitter. And that's so true for us. So often in life, we can't see the beauty, the light, the redemption, the hope, the love, the peace, because we are bitter, and therefore everything tastes bitter, seems bitter, is experienced as bitter. And I leave you with this, verse 25. So that we complained, like Logan read. We complained. Vayilonu ha'am al Moshe. They complained against Moshe, the people, saying, "What are we going to drink?" Verse 25, it has Moses crying out to God, who shows him a tree, and he throws the tree into the waters, and the waters become sweet. You know what the rabbis teach here? And this is such a mashal, a metaphor, a teaching for life. They're at bitter waters because they are bitter. Therefore, the waters became bitter. And again, for us, is it our bitterness within that is making everything bitter without? Not always. Sometimes we've just got misery and sorrow and evil without. Yes, but the only thing we can redeem is the within. The bitterness within is going to make everything more bitter without. The rabbis teach that this tree that God showed Moses, the tree that he threw into the water, and the waters became sweet. Vayimteku hamayim, sorry, it's not the end. The ending would be hamayim, but it's a middle end. So it's vayimteku hamayim, and the waters became sweet. You know what the rabbis say on that? That the tree or the piece of wood that he threw in was a bitter tree, a bitter herb. It was the bitterness that made the bitterness sweet. And the metaphor, I think, or the mashal for us in life that we can take with us to meditate, and I mean it, and to contemplate as we are going through our stops, starting with Piachirot, that call to freedom. The bitterness that we experience in life is going to be part of that journey out of Egypt, out of darkness, out of struggle, on the way to redemption and wisdom. We don't need sweetness to make life sweet. According to the rabbis, and they knew from struggle, we haven't had a wonderful history. They said the bitterness of the waters was sweetened by the bitterness of the tree. That's what made it sweet. And for us, what I try to do with this teaching in life is remind myself that yes, I'm in pain and I'm struggling. Life is bitter. And it's just served up another meal or batch or dose of bitterness. So my natural response would be to be even more bitter and more angry. But this, I think, is trying to teach us somehow that this bitterness and suffering and sorrow in our journey towards redemption and wisdom at Sinai, somehow the bitterness upon bitterness can actually transform itself into the sweetness. I don't know how, but that's what I think it's teaching us there, and I would leave us with that as we go on our journey this week out of Egypt, into redemption, into wisdom at Sinai, metaphoric wisdom, whatever your Sinai place is, whatever your wisdom texts are, that the bitterness that we experience in life, even though we are out of a darker place, my prayer is that the bitterness that we experience and the suffering that we encounter, that we don't go back, that we remember that somehow this bitterness is going to be sweetened, even if I encounter more bitterness. And the hope and prayer for all of us, or my prayer for all of us, is that we don't become more bitter in the process, but that we find blessing and light and share that with everybody. Those are my closing words. If somebody wants to leave us with one more thought, we'll do that. And we got 1 or 2 minutes left, and we can either end there, or if somebody has a thought, we can end with your thoughts.
Rabbi, I couldn't resist inserting something from the liturgy my shul normally doesn't use last night. It's from Mishkan Tefillah, Shabbat evening version 2.
Yeah.
I had my congregants lead that instead of me, and I respond.
You had your what? I'm sorry?
I had my congregants lead me instead of me.
Yes. Okay.
They're leading, and they asked, when will redemption come? And so I cued it to where I would respond, when we grant for everyone what we demand for ourselves.
Okay.
And everybody's kind of like, oh.
I love that.
Okay, I'll take you for the service again to finish that.
Thank you. Thank you. I hope we find sweetness even in our bitterness. And I look forward to seeing your beauty, your light, your sweetness at our next study, or on Monday, if anybody can join for our interfaith dialogue, where we're going to have a monthly, for however long it lasts, we're going to have monthly interfaith dialogues with religious scholars and every month to learn about other faith traditions. So thank you all for coming, and we'll see you on Monday, I hope. 6 o'clock Colorado time.
Thank you so much. Yeah, everybody, please, you're all welcome to join us Monday night and the subsequent ones. If you need the links and you want us to send them, just let us know. There's an email address I put in the chat, info@templeaaron.org, and we'll send the links before each of Rabbi Joe's sessions, and he's got amazing people lined up. I'm really excited about it. It's going to be great. So thank you so much.
I'll send them out too. So thank you all. We'll see you all hopefully soon.